Hope you're having a good day. So my name is Hai. I am currently working at Google, and today I will be talking about what it's like to work and also have fun in IT. So these are the things I'll talk about today. So I'll start a little bit about me, then I will talk about why I think you should be working in tech. Then after I've convinced you, I will talk about what are the different jobs in IT that you might be interested in. The next section, I will talk about programming, and I'll talk about app development, which is something I currently do at Google, and also web development, which is something I did before I joined Google. Finally, I will talk a little bit about what it's like to be working at Google, and the final part of the presentation will be a little bit about machine learning and artificial intelligence. Very hot topics in the current days. All right, so let's begin. So very briefly about me. So I'd like to think of myself as someone who doesn't really know where home is, because I was born Vietnamese. My parents are Vietnamese, but I was born in Slovakia. I grew up in Czech Republic, and then for university I went to England. I'm currently working at Google in London, and I've been working there for 4.5 years. I've started programming since I was 13, and so I've spent most of my life doing programming than not programming. All right, so now I will try to convince you to why I think you should be working in tech. So first of all, what is technology? So when you hear the word technology, you can think of many different things. So you probably think of the cool stuff that we are surrounded by. So for example, an airplane or a railway, or something as simple as your TV. And maybe you think of something as futuristic as robots, for example, that look and interact like humans. But if we think closer, what really is technology? So even something as simple as this spanner here is a piece of technology. So I'd like to define technology as something that helps to solve a problem, either solving a problem or taking existing piece of technology and making it better, or making it more efficient, making it, for example, cheaper to use, or make it accessible to millions of users. So in that regard, for example, alphabet could be considered technology, because the alphabet allows people to write down ideas, to write them down on paper and share them with others, and therefore spread knowledge. It solves a particular problem. A book, for example, is an extension that builds on top of the alphabet, allows more knowledge to be captured together and then shared easily with others. And finally, for example, something like the printing press, in a similar way, builds on top of that. It allows books to be produced in big numbers relatively easily and cheaply. Before the printing press, to copy a book would be a laborious process that involves people writing by hand, which would take days, if not weeks, and also is obviously could cause mistakes. Somebody could copy the text wrong, or leave some words, or forget something. Whereas with the printing press, you're not only able to do that much more quickly, but also much more cheaply and without almost any errors. So in that sense, if we think about technology as something that has helped solve a problem, or solve a problem in a very efficient way. Now, we are very lucky to be surrounded by computers these days, and also we are all surrounded by internet. For example, this talk I'm giving is done through internet, and that would not have been possible maybe 10 or 20 years ago. So with that technology, we are now unlocking the power of digital technology. We are able to create software that can change the world and is, in a true sense, a technology. So here, for example, everyone has a phone, and obviously you have to make a phone. But once you have a phone, you can create almost infinite number of applications, ranging from games to camera apps to applications that help you, for example, book a taxi. So I'm sure you've used Uber before, or for example, book a hotel on Airbnb. If you think again, 20 years ago, before you were all born, it would be a long, complicated process. You might have to phone a friend or phone a company to help you find a hotel. Then you have to figure out how to pay them for the room, etc., etc. Nowadays, all that is possible from a simple device that fits in your hand, and I think that's quite powerful. Another picture here on the top right, you see a warehouse, and those little orange things underneath are robots, which again are controlled by software. They are able to move around goods in a warehouse. I think this is actually an Amazon warehouse. So if you use Amazon, you know it's very easy to order things and to purchase and order things and get them delivered to your house. But how does it all work? Well, it used to be that humans would operate, would move goods around, but nowadays, as you see, it can be done by robots. And robots are much cheaper than humans. They never fail. They can work 24 hours per day, and they don't get tired. So, thanks to software, combination of hardware and software, we are able to make these amazing advances. Bottom left, you see a self-driving car. I think that's very exciting too. Again, driving something that I guess you're not able to do yet, but in a few years' time, you will be able to take a driving test and learn to drive a car. But who knows? In the future, maybe you don't need to do that because robots and software will be able to drive cars for you, so you don't have to. And then a quick example in the finance sector. Again, trading is something that was done by humans, but nowadays computers are able to do that as well, and with the same, if not higher, accuracy and efficiency than humans. And obviously, we are surrounded by many successful tech companies. So obviously, Google is where I work, and everybody hopefully knows Google. Some of you will use an iPhone that's made by Apple, and all these services that I've mentioned that you probably use as well, such as Facebook, or Uber, or Airbnb. These are extremely successful companies that have built their success on top of technology, and most importantly, on digital technology. Right, so hopefully I've convinced you that you want to work in IT, and I will now try to explain what are the different roles in IT, what kind of jobs can you get if you want to work in IT. Just to explain, some of these are very specific to Google, but it's good to introduce them because if you move to a different company, it will be roughly similar, and you will recognize many of the responsibilities here. All right. So, in order to make a digital product, many different people are involved. It's not just about programming. There's as I said, technology is about solving a problem, and in order to realize what the problem is and how to actually solve it is a very long process, and there's many people involved. So let's begin with software engineer. So software engineering is traditionally known as coding or programming. The job of a software engineer is to write code that will operate on data or manipulate data or display it on a screen. That is the general job of a software engineer. That is generally split into backend and frontend. So backend is, as I mentioned, is operating on data and working sort of behind the scenes. So let's take an example of Facebook, for example. You've all used Facebook, right? If you use Facebook, you need to log in. You're able to, after you log in, you're able to view a stream of status updates, which includes photos, and you're also able to message your friends. So, for example, the backend would be responsible for making sure that the photos you upload get stored somewhere, that when you log in, we verify that it is you and not someone else, and that when you visit a friend's page, for example, you're able to see their photos. So that is all back-end work. On the front end, on the other hand, is focused on display of information. So when you use Facebook on your phone, that application would have been written by a front-end engineer. Their responsibility is to create the experience that you enjoy on your phone. So that includes, where do buttons go, what happens when you click on the like button, for example, etc., etc. So that is the software engineer. Next up, we have test engineer. So test engineer are more concerned with making sure that the app works and that any bugs are found, because at the end of the day, writing code is still a human activity, and as we know, humans are known to make errors. Uh, Developing a product is a continuous cycle. So once you've created an app or you've created a website, it doesn't stop there. You have to keep improving it. So a role of a test engineer is also to make sure that as the product changes, it doesn't introduce new bugs, or that old bugs do not come up. Next up, we have a systems engineer. So again, let's go back to the Facebook example. Facebook has, I believe, over 1 billion users. Now that's a lot of people. And if you think that, if you imagine that every user will upload at least one photo a day, that is 1 billion pictures every day. And they need to be stored somewhere. So the systems engineer's role is to support that. Their job is to make sure there's enough hardware, enough disk drive to store those 1 billion pictures a day, and that there's enough computers to make sure that that data can be pulled out and shown to users. So that, for example, when I upload a picture to Facebook, my grandma in Vietnam is able to see that picture within milliseconds. A security engineer is someone who looks after the system to make sure that it cannot be hacked, so that, for example, I cannot pretend to be your teacher, for example, and be able to see her friends or her information. So that is the concern of a security engineer. They have to figure out various flaws in different parts of the application. So, for example, in the app, that it's not possible to, log back in once you log out, etc. Now we're moving on to the slightly different kind of role. So UI designer is someone who designs, as you would think, designs the look and feel of the app. So they will determine, the colors, the layout of things. So, should the like button be at the bottom of the picture, or should it be at the top? For example, Instagram, when you like a picture, you double tap on the photo, for example, but on Facebook, for example, you don't do that. You tap on a like button that's actually underneath the photo. So these kind of decisions are made by someone called a UI designer. UX designer, it sounds very similar, but it's a different role. So UX designer is less concerned with how things look, but with the way things behave. So, for example, how do you help the user upload a picture, for example? Should they be able to tap a button, or should they be able to swipe something down, for example, or should they be able to select multiple pictures? How would that work? And for example, if something accidentally is selected, how do you unselect it, etc. So it's more to do with the flow of the app and sort of a task, solving how the user would do a particular task in your product. Then we have the product manager. So the product manager is concerned with the actual problem. So if you feel like you're not very technical, or not very good with design, you could consider yourself a product manager if you at least know how to approach solving a problem. So the job of a product manager is to define what problem to solve, and also to bring the team together, to bring everyone else together to solve that problem. So I will give an example of, let's say, Instagram, of how these different roles interact. So here you have a bunch of users on the right, and they all have a phone. Now, you start with the product manager asking, what is it we want to solve? So let's say they want to solve a problem of how do people share photos? How do we help users share their photos but make them beautiful so that other people would also want to look at them? Your usual next step would be to do some market research. So this could either be the product manager, or there's a separate role who will look into understanding the problem and figuring out how to solve it. So this person could, for example, figure out that people like square photos, or they like photos that have lots of pretty colors in them. So they would, for example, suggest that the app should have filters. So after doing some research and defining what the problem is, we know now that we want to build Instagram, for example. We want to build an app that allows you to quickly share photos, to quickly make them quickly and easily make them more beautiful by using filters, and also allow you to see what other people have shared. So now it comes to the design stage. So the UI designer and the UX designer will come together and figure out what the app will look like and how it will behave. After that is done, the backend, then it comes to engineering. So the backend developer will write the backend code to store all the images, to make sure that people can follow each other, etc., etc. Then you have the front-end engineer writing the app, for example, for the phones. So they will make sure that it is able to download pictures and display them, and also build in screens that allow you to upload a picture and then apply a filter, and then with a tap of a button, upload it. Now, obviously, you need servers to run the backend code. The front-end code obviously runs on the phones. You need some database to store all the images and all the information about the users. Then you wire it all up. And finally, you have a test engineer who will then make sure that everything works and that we've solved the problem that we've set out to address. And then finally, we release the app to the users, and they're happy. They're able to download it from the App Store and install. After installing it, they're able to upload their pictures, make it pretty by filters, and sharing with others. Obviously, this is not the end. The users will have suggestions, they will report problems, and that feeds back to the product manager, who will then decide which problems to solve next, and then the whole cycle continues. So that was an example of the jobs that are kind of available in some companies. There are other jobs which are also out there and might be suited to other industries. So for example, a data analyst is someone who uses programming to look at data to derive information. So for example, a data analyst might figure out that the best time to post on Instagram is, who knows, Friday, 5 p.m. So they might feed this information back into the team, and they will decide, okay, well, if you're a user and you upload a picture at 4 p.m., for example, we might delay displaying that picture to your friends to make sure that we might delay it to 5 p.m. so that we make sure your photo gets seen by the most amount of people possible. You can also get into game programming. That's a very, very tricky but very interesting field where you get to apply a lot of different skills. So you might be implementing AI, or you might be applying your maths knowledge in order to make a really beautiful visual that run smoothly and effectively on modern day hardware. If you like games, then you might be interested in trying some of this out. All right, so I've talked a lot about programming, but what is programming? What does it actually mean to do programming, or what is it actually like? I believe some of you might have programmed before. You probably tried Pascal or maybe a little bit of C, I believe. So, but if you've never tried any programming, then in short, programming is about giving instructions to computers. You could think of it as, in parallel, it's similar to giving instructions to a human, but computers are generally quite stupid compared to humans. So, if I ask a human to pass me a book, for example, they are able to understand what a book is, and they understand the concept of passing something. So they're able to understand that as pick up the book and hand it to me so that I'm able to then take that book. Computers are not that smart, so you need to give them very precise instructions. On the other hand, computers never get tired, and if you give the computer the same instruction, they will generally do the same thing every time. When I was smaller, I used to like to think about programming as building something out of a Lego. So you have an idea in your mind, and then you use all these little pieces to make that idea a reality. I'm sure that you've all played with Lego before, so you know what that feels like. And programming is not too different from that. Nowadays, I like to think of programming as more of a building a car. So when you build a car, there's many different pieces. The door, for example, has a different function from the steering wheel, and the steering wheel has a different function from, say, a car engine. But when you put it all together, it creates something that is that helps solve a problem. As I said, coming back to what technology is, all of these pieces come together to create something that helps you in real life. If you've never tried programming, or even if you've tried programming before, I strongly recommend you learn Python. It's a very easy language to pick up. As you can see on the right-hand side, there's a sample code, which I think it's very easy to understand, even if you've never seen or tried Python before. Python is a very popular language. You can use it in various fields, and if you learn it, it will help you understand other programming concepts and languages as well. All right, moving on. I will talk a little bit about web development. So this is something I used to do before I joined Google. So let's go back a few years. So internet has been around for quite a long time, but I think you are very lucky to be born at a time where you would have grown up with internet. When I was born, obviously internet was out there, but I didn't have it until I was 14 years old. And back then, things looked very different. So this is, for example, Wikipedia, the way it looked about 20 years ago. This is Google. This is how it looked in 1998. So that's almost 20 years ago. This is Yandex in 1999. As you can see, it's very different. Nowadays, if you fast forward 20 years, websites now are beautiful and are extremely complex and are able to do very complicated things. When you use Facebook or Vkontakte or any of these online web applications, they're extremely complex and they have many, many different components to them. You're able to do all sorts of things within your browser, which is, I think, is quite amazing. Look at this. This is a picture editing app called Pixlr. It's not Photoshop. This app runs in your browser. It is able to edit images the same way you would use Photoshop, for example. So if you get into web development, this is, for example, Facebook, and it shows how the different pieces are put together to create the landing page of Facebook. Creating a website nowadays is quite fun and not too hard, actually. If you want to, you're able to register a domain, so a www.something.ua, for example. You're able to create that along with everything else in less than an hour. So if you wanted to, and you have the skills and you have the sort of the curiosity to learn, you're able to book a domain, book some hosting, so some servers to put your code in, and then write the code to then be deployed to the web. So all of this can be done very easily. And within hours, you could have your own website that anyone in the world could visit, which I think is very amazing. So web development is still very popular these days. So if you'd like to get into that, I would strongly recommend that. Obviously, another hot area of development is app development. So mobile phones have only existed for the past 10 years or so, but have expanded very rapidly. So here we'll talk a little bit about that. So obviously the two main platforms are iPhone and Android, and they have different market shares in different countries, but they're roughly the same. So I recommend that whichever you choose, you will definitely find a job. If you can do both, that's even better. So first of all, let's talk about Android. So Android is created and maintained by Google. The language it is written, the language in which you write apps for Android is Java. Very easy language to pick up. And Android runs on many different phones. So if you have a Samsung phone, an LG phone, Huawei, OnePlus, or even some smaller brands like Very Cool and other regional versions of these phones, they will all run Android in some shape or form. Obviously, on the other side, there's iOS, which is developed and maintained by Apple. You write apps for iOS in either Objective-C or in a more modern version, in a more modern language called Swift. Again, if you've programmed before, I strongly recommend you try out Swift. It's the future of iOS development going forward. Obviously, iOS only runs on iPhones, but As you probably know, iPhones, many people have iPhones, so it's definitely a good investment. So how does app development work? It's not actually too different from other forms of programming. As I say, the backend is mostly the same. If you do web development or app development, backend work tends to be the same. It's on the front end that's slightly different. With developing apps, you have to be careful because the screen is small. The phone screen are much smaller than on the web. So there's different approaches to how to write a proper mobile app. You have to focus more on how you lay out things so that everything is accessible, and also how to make things efficient. Because as powerful as phones are, they are still just small computers. The advantage with mobile phones is that they have many different hardwares in them. So, for example, you have a camera in it, you have a GPS. All of these enable you to do more things that you would be able to do on the web. So you could turn your phone into a navigation device, you could turn it into a camera, you could even turn it into a VR device. So VR is another thing that's very hot these days. If you're interested in that, I definitely recommend you look into that. VR in its simplest form is basically just projecting two slightly different images on the part of your screen into each eye, which then tricks your mind into thinking that you're looking at something 3D. It's an amazing experience. If you have never tried VR before, I strongly recommend that you try it out. Finally, unlike web development, where you're able to get a website up and running in less than an hour, with app development, it's slightly more complicated. In order to publish your app, you need to put it into a store that's dependent on the platform. So, for example, for iOS, you would use the Apple Store, and for Android, you would use Google Play. Now, once you sign up to these stores, you then publish your app. Sorry, you upload your app, and once it's been reviewed and approved, then you're able to then publish it, which then goes out to millions and billions of users all around the world for them to download and try your app out. All right, well, that was a lot of information, and hopefully it's coming to the fun part. So I will talk about what it's like to be working at Google. So Google is a global company. We have companies in many different parts of the world, but unfortunately there is no Google company as of yet, sorry, Google office as of yet in Ukraine, but hopefully maybe in the future. Google creates many different products, so I'm sure you're familiar with the Google search already. You probably use YouTube, you probably have used Chrome, the browser before, and Google Drive and Google Docs, and Gmail, of course, are all made by Google. Google also makes and maintains Android, and recently has started creating its own phone called the Google Pixel, which runs Android. We also make these called netbooks, which run Chrome OS. And we also have ad-related businesses called AdWords and AdSense that allow you to monetize money using ads. So AdWords is placing ads in search results, and AdSense is placing ads in things like news sites and blog sites. All right, well, what it's like to work at Google? Well, if I was to summarize it in 2 words, it's a lot of fun. We have food everywhere, so this is a cafe where we can eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner 5 days a week. So it's very amazing. It's what helps me get up in the morning. You know, when I wake up in the morning, I look forward to going to work so that I can have some food and get to work. We also have lots of micro kitchens. This is where you can get your fruits and snacks. Obviously, as you see, the decoration is a lot of fun. Google offices tend to generally aim for something quirky or something fun that will keep the employees engaged. There's also a games room. There's table tennis. I'm not very good at that. And there's also table football, which I'm slightly better at, but not very good at. People are free to go and have a play anytime they want. Google is very free. There's no fixed hours. You can come in at 11 and you can leave at 8 p.m. if you want, or you can come in early and you can leave early. it doesn't really matter as long as you get your job done. Working at Google is mostly is a lot about self-discipline. So you talk to your manager, you define some goals, and as long as you meet those goals, you're free to work whichever way you want. This is another example of some office decorations. So here you have some working spaces shaped like teacups, and in the background you got a photo booth. Not sure why, but it seems like it's fun. Here you have a slide. I hear that most people try it once and never again because it makes your clothes dirty. But you know, if you don't work at Google, then Googlers are able to bring guests. I think that's 2 every month, and they always have a lot of fun playing around with all the different things that are available in the offices. They also obviously eat a lot of food as well. This is the Google Park. So this is in London. This is my office. So here you see the Google Park. It's not real trees, but it creates this feeling that you know outside in nature, whilst actually inside the office. It's a great place to invite your friends or just have a chat with your colleagues about work or life or anything you really want. I sometimes go and work here if I want to have some quiet time away from my desk. This is also in London. This is the games room in London we have. So there's obviously the billiards table. In the back, you see, you probably can't see it, but it's Xbox and PlayStation 4. And in the background, you can see there's a big library of different games that Googlers have contributed. So if you like games and it's the middle of the day at work and you really want to play FIFA, you are absolutely free to do that. Now, if you get tired from all the eating and playing and not working, then there's also a sleeping pod, which you can get yourself comfortable in and get a quick nap. I've used this myself a couple of times when I was really tired, and after that, I'm always refreshed and ready to get back to work. Obviously, apart from the great facilities and fun things we have, we also have great people. So the people like to work hard and play hard. So here's my friend dressing up as a Yeti for the day. And on the right, you can see that our product manager has just bought an inflatable floating shark, and he's trying to drive it around the office. And let's see. And this is my former manager driving a pink car and holding a gun, looking dangerous. Google also is a dog company. It likes its dogs a lot. So if you have a dog, there are special dog days, which means you can bring your dog to work and he can just hang around. The company loves dogs so much that they even name they name printers after dogs. And this is my desk, I think probably 2-3 weeks after I joined. So obviously there's all of this fun things and lots of free food and everything. But at the end of the day, Google is still a workplace, and we also work really hard. So yes, it's a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, work still has to be done. And thanks to Google's great working place, it is a pleasure to be here. All right, now on to the final bit. So I will very briefly talk about artificial intelligence. It's a very broad topic, and it's still under active research, and I will not claim to know a lot about AI in any shape or form. But very briefly, so what is AI and machine learning about? So computers are very good at specific things, specifically, for example, multiplying large numbers or remembering a lot of things. So kind of things that we humans don't tend to be good at. But we're actually really good at a lot of things. For example, creativity, or understanding text. For example, reading fiction books, we're able to understand and imagine a lot of things, and computers generally are not very good at that yet. So the general purpose or the general aim of AI and machine learning is to recreate the human brain, as it were, to recreate what humans can do and computers cannot yet. A lot of the techniques are sort of based on our understanding of how human brains work. So, for example, neural nets try to model how neurons work in our brain to some extent. Uh, is this diagram familiar to everyone? So this is an example of what's it called? Line fitting, as it were. So you have a bunch of data, and then you try to figure out what the pattern is by drawing a line that fits through all of them. Now, why do I mention this? So a lot of them, a lot of the recent machine learning sort of approaches are based around this principle, where the general principle of having a lot of data with lots of parameters and then trying to figure out what the pattern is. Now, how does this work in machine learning context? So this is an example of something called a neural net. It's a very small one. Normal neural nets have millions of neurons. This one only has about 20 or 30. But here you can see that the neural net on the right was able to figure out what the pattern was and to basically differentiate between orange and blue dots. And it was able to train itself to do that. Now, how does this fit into anything? So if you think about, for example, face recognition in images. Now, face recognition is something that humans are very good at. You know, when we look at a photo, we immediately know how many people are in there or where are the faces in that photo. That's because we have evolved and we have trained our brains to do that. And computers, up until recently, were not able to do that efficiently, but thanks to neural networks such as these, they're now able to recognize faces. They do so by, as I mentioned previously, by simply understanding, by looking at a lot of photos and being told where the faces are, and then they're able to learn, much like a human would, to recognize where a face is. Now, the same technique can be extended to recognizing pictures. Recognizing objects in pictures. So, from the picture on the right, you can see that the computer has annotated a bike and a person in the image, and it was able to do so by having seen lots and lots of pictures of people and having seen lots and lots of pictures of bikes, and being able to infer or derive what is different, what makes bike a bike and what makes a person, in the same way that a human would try to recognize things. So how does this become useful? So, for example, when you use Google image search, when you type in a word, you're actually able to get images because thanks to this technique. So Google searches for images all over the world and then tries to infer what's inside them so that you're able to do something like that. And obviously these techniques get better and better. So, you know, one day you'll be able to search for more complex things. For example, you can ask Google to show you images of, let's say, dogs riding a unicorn. Or in fact, that is already possible today. Right, and one other, so machine learning is actually a very, very broad topic. So when we talk about machine learning, it's not just one algorithm. It's actually a collection of algorithms. And also it's an ongoing research to figure out what these algorithms can do and cannot do, and if there are other ways to approach it. So I'm just gonna quickly touch on one other algorithm from the sort of machine learning pool called deep learning. So I'm sure all of you have played games, right? You play games probably on your mobile phones. You play all sorts of games. You play football, you play basketball, or you play games at home. But I hope you're all familiar with Mario. Now, games have a very special place in my heart, but obviously in hearts of millions of people around the world, and that's because they have two unique things. So one of them is that you have a clear goal. So, for example, if you play, I don't know, if you play Dancing Line on the phone, it's a recent game I played, your goal is to get to the end of the map, right? And if you play Mario, the goal is to make it to the end of the level, to reach the next level without dying, for example. And so that's one aspect of games. There's a very clear goal, and as humans, we understand that goal and are able to get there. The second aspect is that you can retry a lot. So if you die in Mario, you can just try again. Now, if you die in real world, then that's it. You know, you're dead. But in games, you can just keep trying, and that's what helps us get better at things. When you first play Mario, you might be able to survive, I don't know, maybe like for a minute, but then you learn, you realize, okay, don't touch this, this will kill me. Or take this route because that route is easier to do. Or for example, pick up this weapon because that will help me get to get rid of enemies or get to the level much easier. So we're able to learn through this process of trial and error. So you try something, you realize, did it work? Did not work? If it didn't work, do less of that. It did work, do more of that. And deep learning is essentially teaching computers to do exactly the same. So there are now deep learning algorithms that can play Mario, for example, as well, if not better than humans. And you can apply this to many, many different, it's a very powerful technique that you can apply to all sorts of things. So, Google has this company called DeepMind that has made an AI that can play not just one game, but several different games, as well as humans will. So this, for example, is a game of Brick Breaker, which some of you might have played before. And this same AI that can play this game is, for example, then able to play a game like Mario. Next up, what do you have here? Let's see. I'm sure you've recently heard of the breakthroughs in Go. So this game is called Go. I'm not sure if you've played it before. It's a game with very simple rules, but it's actually really hard to play because there's many different options you can take when playing this game. I've tried to play it. It's complicated. I don't understand it. But anyway, it's a game that up until now, computers were not able to beat humans. But recently, there's been a breakthrough, and there is finally an algorithm that can beat the best human or even groups of humans playing this game, which I think is quite amazing. All right, so I would like to. That's the end of my presentation. So I would really like to just briefly say that technology, as I say, is there to help solve problems. And if you'd like to join IT, then you'd be joining the ranks of people who like to look at the world, look at the problems, and figure out how can we solve those problems easily. So I hope with technology, it's gonna less be about terminators and more about a nice and beautiful future where we can make things better and more efficient for everyone. Thank you for listening.
So we're very thankful for this opportunity, for this presentation. I think this presentation very helpful and useful for us. As for me, I don't imagine that Google Office is so incredible place. It's amazing. So, do you have a question?
Yes. Sorry. If you have any questions, please ask.
How hard is to enter the Google company?
I'm sorry? Sorry, could you repeat?
Микрофон не работает?
What do you need to enter the Google company?
So when I talk about the different jobs will generally require will have different requirements. So would you like to apply as a software engineer, or what is the role you're considering?
Maybe. So I think that a lot of people want to enter the Google company, but only the minority of them can do that. And why is it so? Maybe there are some special occasions or what's.
So Google hiring is very diverse. So we hire people solely on their abilities. So if you're a good fit, you've got what it takes to be a software engineer, then there's no problem in hiring you. But generally, I can only speak of software engineering, so programming. So definitely, if you start early, you will. By the time you apply to Google, you would have had years of experience with programming, right? And that is very important because when we hire programmers, we look at how they solve problems. So not only the way they solved it, but the way they arrived at it. So you know, an experienced programmer will be able to talk through the solution. So they will be able to ask more questions. So if I present you with a problem, you will ask follow-on question to figure out exactly what I'm asking, for example. That's one example. And then when you write the code, you're able to write the code in a clean way, in a confident way, as it were. And that's really easy to tell, because if someone hasn't programmed for a long time, it is easy to tell from the mistakes they might make.
Thank you. Another question?
Don't be shy.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And what is your project job in Google?
What is my primary job?
What is your job in Google? Who you work?
Oh yes, so I am a front-end engineer, front-end programmer. So I write mobile apps for iPhones. Currently, I write a mobile app for doctors in England, so so that they can work better. So think of a doctor in a hospital. They will usually use very old system, you know, like running Windows 98 or Windows XP or some other really old software, right? And that's very old. But these doctors have iPhones, and we thought, you know, why don't they use that to do their work? So I'm helping write programs that can display, you know, patient information, for example, and help the doctor do their job more easily. Hope that answers your question.
Another question? Okay, question.
Okay. Do Google have new projects in future?
In future, we have projects all the time, but I probably won't be able to talk about them as it's confidential. But I don't know. Do you use, for example, do you use Android or you use iPhone?
Android.
iPhone. So did you,
Android.
Android. Oh, perfect. Well, for example, there is a big push for virtual virtual reality. So the new version of Android will have lots more support for that. And Google in general is trying to create an environment where more VR apps will be created. So that, for example, is a focus we're working on. Obviously, as I mentioned in the last part of my presentation, there's a big push for AI as well, so artificial intelligence. So if you use, for example, Google Photos, if you back up your photos to Google Photos, you're able to search for them. And that's thanks to AI. So you can search for things like, I don't know, pizza. And then it will show you pictures of pizzas that you've taken, which I think is very amazing. It has helped me find, well, pizzas I've eaten in the past.
Okay.
Okay, another question. Juana.
Hello. What was the biggest problem in your job?
Sorry, can you repeat that? What is the what?
The biggest problem in your career?
What the biggest problem? Well, sometimes I eat so much food that I'm not able to work. It's a big problem. No, the problem is, well, the biggest problem, I think this problem everyone has is that there isn't enough hours in the day to to do everything. So I'm very lucky and very happy to be at Google, because I can work on projects that I genuinely enjoy and have fun. And sometimes, you know, there isn't enough, but there is so much work to do and to get things done. And sometimes there isn't enough time in the day to finish it all. So maybe that would be one of the problems.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Aline. Do you have a question? Maybe it's the last question, yes? Okay, we're very thankful for this opportunity, for this lesson. I think they get a lot of new information. This information is very useful, and very helpful for them. Now, could you give some advices related to their future profession?
Sure. I wanted to ask you a question. So, how many of you have programmed before? Have done programming or learned programming?
How many? Yes. How many? How much? How many programs? Программ. Вот, я просто не знаю, что знать.
Maybe 5 program, but it was very simple. Like the beginning programs.
Oh, don't worry. When I started out, it was very simple, and but did you have fun? Did you enjoy it?
Yes, of course.
That is the most important thing. It's a long journey, but if you enjoy it, then I think it's something you should pursue. Now, even if you haven't tried programming before, I strongly encourage you. There's lots of website online like Code Academy or Udemy where you can try programming. I think you should try at least once. You never know. You might like it, and then it might something that turns into your career. When I started programming, I didn't know this is what I'll end up doing. I just did it because I had fun, and then when it came to finding a job, I realized that, hey, maybe this is something I could do. And if you've tried it and you don't like it, don't despair. As I say, when I talk about the jobs in IT, there are many different roles that don't require you to program. It will always be a plus, and if you want to be at Google, you probably want to have had tried programming at some stage in your life. But for example, if you want to work in tech, there are many different roles. So as I mentioned, you can be a UI designer, you can be a UX designer, which do not require to have a programming background. And it's still very rewarding to work in tech. As I say, as a UX designer, UI designer, you are solving real problems, just not using programming.
Okay, maybe it's the last question. Yes. Another question? Okay. We are very thankful, and we haven't any question. It's the first online election, and for us, and you are very thankful. It's really true, and we hope that it's not the last online lecture in our cooperation, and we hope in the future we'll contact and maybe have one more lecture too.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good luck to all of you. You've been a great audience, and I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, best of luck in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.